Well, I won't back down. No, I won't back down. You could stand me up at the gates of hell, but I won't back down. No, I'll stand my ground. Won't be turned around. And I'll keep this world from dragging me down. Gonna stand my ground, and I won't back down. Hey, baby, there ain't no easy way out. Hey, I will stand my ground, and I won't back down. Well, I know what's right. I've got just one life in a world that keeps on pushing me around, but I'll stand my ground, and I won't back down.
Well, good evening and welcome to another Restore UK Live. Going out to Restore UK on Facebook, also to the British Unionist People's Voice on Facebook. And from there, what you can do is that you can share this broadcast far and wide. And if you would like to do that, that would be gratefully appreciated. This evening, we've got Ben Habib, a man that's no stranger to this screen. And we're here to talk about the protocol and the Windsor Framework. You get that much mixed up, Ben. There's that many names, but the reality is, Ben, it's all the same thing. I mean, who remembers the backstop? And then the oven ready deal. And now the oven ready deal, well overcooked, has ended up in the Windsor Framework deal, is high that many commentators are actually naming this. So, Ben, really want to we'll just get straight into this here, and we'll talk about the nitty gritty of the framework. Now, I've seen some of your newspaper articles and some of your the tweets that you've been making on Twitter, and I think it would be right to say that you're not in favour of the Windsor Framework. Over to you, Ben.
I'm not at all in favour of it. The Windsor Framework is delivered under Article 164 of the Withdrawal Agreement, which requires the Joint Committee, which is the committee of EU representatives and British representatives created by the Withdrawal Agreement, to ensure that any tweaks done to the protocol, if any tweaks are done to the protocol, do not in essence change the protocol. And the Windsor Framework, by the EU's own declaration, is completely compliant with Article 164, So the Windsor Framework, however which way Rishi Sunak, Chris Heaton-Harris and Steve Baker may wish to dress it up, is actually just another form of the protocol. And actually, I would argue, John, in some ways, it's taken steps which are detrimental to Northern Ireland in a way that the protocol wasn't, which we can discuss in greater detail if you like. But I think the Windsor Framework is not a new arrangement. It's not a new deal. It is the protocol with a few tweaks, and those tweaks are wholly consistent with the fundamental essence of the protocol. So it's no real advancement of Northern Ireland's position.
Yeah. And Ben, I had Professor John Tong from the University of Liverpool. He joined us on Thursday evening, and he prepared a little slide here for us. And I would like to just open up the slide, and I would like to basically ask you some questions based on what this slide would show. And I'm just going to pop it up on our screen here. And you'll note here that John has titled this the Windsor Framework, aka Protocol Mark II. Now, it's just a short slide where we're going to move on to the DUP7 test. Now, Ben, could you have a look at those tests and take your time, go through the tests there, and tell me and tell everyone else, has any of those tests been met?
Well, fulfill Article 6 of the Act of Union. Well, that clearly hasn't been met because there are going to be green lanes and red lanes between Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and there are certainly no green lanes or red lanes between England and Scotland or England and Wales or any of the other provinces or countries, as you may wish to call them, of Great Britain. So clearly the Acts of Union, Article 6 of the Acts of Union has not been restored. Avoid any diversion of trade. Well, that's not right either, because we've already had a massive diversion of trade. And even though we're going to have green lanes from Great Britain to Northern Ireland, you have to apply for trusted trader status. You have to nevertheless fill in, I think it's 21 headings of information when you send goods over. Apart from anything else, you've got to declare that those goods are for consumption in Northern Ireland, that they won't find their way into the European Union. So there are impediments to trade from Great Britain, and that is bound to cause a diversion towards Northern Ireland, towards the Republic. And the other thing to bear in mind is that under the Windsor Framework, like under the protocol, the EU will be making new laws, and as it makes new laws, Northern Ireland will find itself subject to EU laws, which Great Britain won't be, and it'll find trade, therefore, increasingly easier with the Republic than it will with Great Britain. So avoid diversion of trade. Well, that ain't going to happen under the Windsor Framework. Not contribute a border in the Irish Sea. Well, we've got green lanes and red lanes between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. They're symptomatic of a border. You only get green lanes and red lanes when you go to a foreign country. So it doesn't comply with test number 3. Give the people of Northern Ireland the say in making the laws which govern them. Okay, so here there's a bit of subterfuge from Rishi Sunak and Maros Sefcovic and Ursula von der Leyen, where they've concocted this Stormont break. The Stormont break, actually, before I discuss the Stormont break, there's a kind of insidious, under the radar thing that's taken place as a result of the Stormont break, and it's this, that the Stormont break only applies to new laws that the EU may wish to make. It ostensibly, and we'll come to the detail of it, it ostensibly gives unionists in Stormont the right to prevent new laws coming into place. But what it does automatically in the Windsor Framework is assert all the existing EU laws without any right of refusal. So bizarrely, in offering up this Stormont break, actually what the Windsor Framework has done is confirm that all existing EU laws that apply in Northern Ireland will apply in full force without unionists having any say against those. And note that, because that's a big step away from what you had before. What we had before was the ability to reject the entire protocol. Now we're just talking about new laws the EU may wish to make. And the way this break works or in my view doesn't work, is that if 30 MLAs, and it's got to be 30 MLAs from at least two unionist parties or two parties, wish to exercise the break, they say they want to do it. They can only do it in exceptional circumstances. Impact assessments have to be made to evidence that actually the new law is going to have a major impact on Northern Ireland. And once they've done all that, they then submit their application for the Stormont break to be exercised to Westminster. So you rely completely on His Majesty's government to actually stand by Stormont and do the right thing and pull the brake on the new law. But here's the really big rub with the whole thing, and that is that even if Westminster, His Majesty's government backs the Stormont break, which, by the way, I have very little confidence in them doing, and on any occasion, but let's assume that they do it, the EU has the right to take remedial action against the United Kingdom. So, in other words, you can read that as imposing either other new laws or sanctions or whatever it may be. So the Stormont break, if it's ever exercised, can only be exercised after a very high hurdle is passed, and then the EU effectively has the right to step over it anyway. It doesn't work. So this democratic deficit that test number 4 that the DUP set out, that's not addressed. Result in no checks on goods going from Northern Ireland to Great Britain or from Great Britain to Northern Ireland. Well, we've already addressed that. The green and red lanes, those are checks. Ensure no new regulatory borders develop between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK. Well, we just discussed how existing EU laws are going to be reasserted in Northern Ireland. The Stormont break doesn't work. So we're going to have a continuation of new EU laws applying in Northern Ireland, which won't be applying in Great Britain. So regulatory borders exist, and they're going to get more defined. Northern Ireland is going to be subsumed into the Republic and the EU as a result of the Windsor Framework. And the last one is preserve, sorry, I can't read on, I'm doing this on my phone. Preserve the letter and spirit of NI's constitutional guarantee in the Belfast Agreement by requiring consent from a majority of the citizens of any for any diminution in the status as part of the United Kingdom. Well, this isn't going to any constituency in Northern Ireland. This is Windsor Framework is being imposed, not just on Northern Ireland, it's being imposed on the entire United Kingdom without any say by a Prime Minister who, by the way, hasn't been elected. So I don't think any of these 7 tests are met. And frankly, I'm surprised the DUP hasn't already come out and dismissed the Windsor Framework for what it is, which is just, the protocol Mark II.
Yeah. And I mean, would you say that this is a surrender of Northern Ireland to the EU?
Northern Ireland was surrendered to the EU on 31st January 2020. And we've been fighting a rearguard action to rescue Northern Ireland. And not a very successful rearguard action, John, truth be told, because this is reasserting the protocol. And Rishi Sunak has thrown Boris Johnson threw Northern Ireland under a bus. Rishi Sunak is kind of reversing the bus backwards and having another crack. It's awful.
Yeah. And just to sort of flip forward on this slide here, and this was John's attempt at trying to find, was there any positives in this document? I mean, I look at that number 1, and I say fulfill Article 6 of the Act of the Union. Well, that hasn't been done, and that takes away UK citizens' rights here in Northern Ireland whenever that hasn't been reinstated again. It remains in a disapplied state, or it remains subjugated, Ben, and I don't know how, and as you say, with reference to the DUP, that they haven't been more forthright in their telling people what they think of this document, because I'm always of the belief that you're better stating your case and stating your case very clearly before this goes any further. However, we're not the people with the fingers on the hands on the levers of power, unfortunately. So all we can do is really talk about it. So again, I'm just going to flip across here to the next one, and I'll read this for you, Ben. I know you're finding it hard to read from the phone.
Yeah,
so the revised protocol. So John cites the pluses And the pluses would be minimal checks on goods going GB to NI, use of Green Lane channel to checks NI to GB. Bans of foodstuffs and medicines are lifted. Restrictions on pet movement. The physical Irish sea border largely disappears. With due respect to John, I mean, I look at that and I think to myself, well, it's an EU regulatory border. We are trapped inside the EU single market. And the union, it's made up of two things. It's made up of political, and it's also made up of economic union. And I believe that what's been gifted to the EU here and Dublin is the half of the union in Northern Ireland, which is the economic union. And I call it now that we're British in name only in Northern Ireland.
Yeah, and just one thing I'd like to add, these pluses, these relaxation, creation of the green lane, that can be unilaterally withdrawn by the EU at any time. This is a derogation. It is not set in stone as an agreement between the British government and the EU. This is a derogation granted by the EU, which it can withdraw. So the pluses are there with a sword of Damocles, even for those very small pluses.
This is something that I do want to pop up here because, I have been speaking from 2016, 23rd of June 2016, and I've been always encouraging people that, an army of people must be put together with weapons of words to fight this with. And, we've taken things to the court. We've done everything legally, lawfully. You're part of it yourself. And, they don't seem to be listening. And even in the Supreme Court, it wasn't that the arguments were defeated. It was that the British government are sovereign. And basically they told us they can do whatever they want. They can change whatever they want, whenever they want, however they want. And when you're up against that...
Including dissolving the country. Let's just get that out there.
Yeah,
including dissolving the country.
Yeah, so that's what they're doing. So yes, look, I would always advocate that words is what's needed, and that's what we need to continue to do. But yeah, we can see why people would just say what's on our screen here, because seemingly they're not listening. And will they listen? Well, we just have to keep pushing and pushing and pushing, and continuing to highlight our case. Now, it's all not lost because we're going to come to at the end of this screen. Well, what we're going to do, there's no use shouting, or there's no use criticizing or criticizing people from the sidelines if you haven't got a solution. And I believe that we'll have a solution, and I would like to discuss it. And it was something that you said on another stream with us, Ben, that got us thinking. And anyway, we'll come to that at the very end. So, well, the solution, I believe, to the problem here. There you go. There's what John has said there, Ben, and I don't know whether that is pluses or not. We've got a green lane. We are only being returned to the place where we should be. In other words, there should be free flow of goods around the United Kingdom as per the promises laid out in the Act of the Union. That's the way it should be. So they're giving us nothing. There's no pluses in that. In fact,
the green lane is not without checks. Let's not make that mistake. There are 21 categories of information that need to be filled in. You've got to apply for trusted trader status. That can be withdrawn. The green lane is not just a free flow of goods. That is, it's still got constraints, and it can be unilaterally withdrawn. The principle of the green lane, the entire green lane, can be withdrawn by the EU if it wishes to do it.
Yeah. And you will see here that even the professor of politics has written that the Irish sea border still exists. The red channel, the green channel, the EU can object to the issue raised by the UK government. That's through the Stormont break that you're talking about. And, the European Court of Justice remains the ultimate legal arbiter over anything that happens here in Northern Ireland. So look, I'm impressing upon people here that we are left trapped within the EU single market, and the EU Court of the ECJ, they have the final say on anything that happens from within the EU single market. So we'll pop that down, John, or Ben, and then we'll move on to our next little slide. You just bear with me for a second. So there's that down. Now, what I want to do here, Ben, is I want to play something that John would have said on The View for Stormont last week, and we heard him talking. And then I would like to seek your commentary on what it is that you hear John Tongue say.
spin on the deal, it reads remarkably differently from the document that was issued by the European Union and its interpretation of the deal. And Rishi Sunak has been spinning the Sunak oil salesman, as one loyalist described it to me earlier this evening. Compare that to the EU's document, and you think, have they signed the same deal here?
Ben, over to you, Ben.
Well, I learnt long ago to read the EU's documents rather than our own government's documents if I want to really find out what's going on. The EU have no option but to actually tell it as it is, because they've got 27 EU member states to which they have to report, and they can't put stuff out which is subterfuge for their 27 states. The British government is in a habitual process of hoodwinking the electorate. They've done it with the Windsor Framework. They're doing it now with this illegal migration bill, which doesn't work either. They do it with their claim that they wish to cut taxes. They don't. They say everything they need to say in order to play the 24-hour news cycle to try and get whatever their political agenda is over the line. The British government hold the electorate in contempt. And when they put out documents on the Windsor Framework, far from actually describing accurately what's going on, what they're doing is putting out their political interpretation, what they would like to foist as their political interpretation on the Windsor Framework. So if you really want to understand what the Windsor Framework is about, don't read anything put out by His Majesty's government. Go to the EU website and read it.
And that's always a good tip. The gloss that's been put on by Rishi Sunak is well, I think it's overcooked now. It really is overcooked. By the way, on that little clip when he says that Rishi Sunak was described by one loyalist as Sunak oil salesman, that was my phrase, by the way, on our screen on Thursday evening, because that's what he's doing. He's, you've heard of the snake oil salesman, and he's selling us something which isn't actually what it is. So Ben, now that we've looked at that, I want to remind people, what our conflict in Northern Ireland, what the Troubles was all about, and then we'll want to sort of explore. Are we like, those that forget the past, they're condemned to repeat it, is the old phrase. So I just want to explore, are we in danger of repeating the past by enhancing one at the expense of another? Listen to David Trimble as he explains what the Troubles in Northern Ireland was all about.
Again, before it comes to the question of why did it start, we have to address the question of what actually is it, what are we dealing with in terms, what is the issue that is there? The essence of the issue in Northern Ireland is a clash of different national identities and different national allegiances. It's a clash between people who view themselves as belonging to a separate Irish nation and people who view themselves as being part of British society and consequently part of the United Kingdom. It's a question of to which state shall this piece of territory belong?
So you'll have heard that being explained by David Trimble, and that was one of the things that he did say that was right, let's just say. But whenever that we look at it, Ben, that's what it's all about. It's all about who owns this piece of land, whether it belongs to the Republic of Ireland or whether it belongs to the UK, the United Kingdom. And, to me, I'm just going to try to explain something to people. On the 23rd of June, 2016, the people of Northern Ireland went to the EU referendum on the same ballot ticket with the same questions as every single person right around this United Kingdom. And our democracy has been removed. We've been denied our democracy. And to add insult to the injury, now what they're saying is that, you can't, you're not even part of the United Kingdom now. You're sort of half in, you're half out. We're given the half of the United Kingdom, which is the, for trade purposes, we're given that over completely, hook, line and sinker to the EU. Are we in danger, Ben? And this is a question for you, and you've been around Northern Ireland for quite some time now, but are we in danger of causing problems here in the future? Now, I'm not talking about people lifting a gun or going out to do the things of the past, but, is it going to be the situation, the turnabout in the situation whereby that then, the unionist people, they feel aggrieved and they start disrupting things the way that maybe Sinn Féin and the Republicans had been disrupting things in the past. Do you have any thoughts on that, where we may end up as a result of this unfairness that's being thrust upon us?
Well, it's very difficult, obviously, to predict where this all ends up. But one thing I'm certain of, and that it's this, that a big injustice is being done to British citizens in Northern Ireland. And the injustice is that you were promised the right to express your view on any significant constitutional change before that constitutional change took place. And, that's been ridden over, it's been ridden roughshod over. So your right to consent has been ignored. And that is a huge injustice. That's taxation without representation. And that's going to go on being the case as new EU laws are made. And whether that manifests itself in, civil strife or not remains to be seen. But there is something else that's going on here. There's a diversion of trade, but there's also economic mismanagement of the entire United Kingdom by Westminster. And Northern Ireland is about to suffer even more under this Tory government, because it's going to raise corporation tax from 19% to 25%, which puts Northern Ireland now not 6.5% ahead of the Republic, but actually twice the rate of corporation tax in the Republic. And you operate on an open economic basis. We know that. That's the whole debate about the protocol. You operate on an open economic basis, and it's going to suck even more business out of Northern Ireland into the Republic. And when people have a cost of living crisis followed by problems in the private sector caused by His Majesty's government, and they recognize they've had an injustice foisted on them, at some point, people may break. We saw this in Greece in 2012. We came very close to civil strife in Greece when Angela Merkel then backed off. And I'm not wishing it. I hope it doesn't happen. But at some point, if the people of Northern Ireland continue to be treated with contempt by Westminster, and if the economic plight gets worse, and it's not good at the moment with the cost of living crisis, if it gets worse, which I believe it will, there may come a tipping point where people say enough is enough. And personally, I reached that tipping point a few years ago. I was a private businessman, and I'm now doing shows like this because I've been triggered. But I really hope it doesn't come to civil strife, but you can't rule it out. And the government needs to be very attuned to that. And that's why they mustn't ride roughshod over promises and declarations made. That's why Rishi Sunak shouldn't sell stuff to be something that it's not. Because people aren't stupid. They figure it out. They may not figure it out instantly, but they figure it out. And if they feel they've been shafted, forgive the use of words, but if they feel they've been shafted, they push back eventually, don't they?
I'm just looking here at this man's comment here, is that it takes a really strong man to stand by his principles. Off the back of that, do you believe that Jeffrey Donaldson should continue to stand for his principles? The protocol must go.
I hope so. I as I've said many times to you, I have a very high regard for Sir Geoffrey, and he has assured me, not that he needs to, but he has, that he will be firm on this subject. It's obvious, isn't it, John, that none of the seven tests are complied with. So I can't see Sir Geoffrey doing anything other than rejecting the Windsor Framework. I may well be proven to be wrong, in which case it would be, I think, catastrophic for the DUP, because 73%, I believe, of the DUP base want the Windsor Framework to be rejected. And if the DUP endorse it, there's no going back, by the way, for Northern Ireland at that point. No. They would have sealed Northern Ireland's fate. And I think the DUP will be held squarely responsible for it. So I think he needs to be very, very careful what he does. He's got to do the right thing. And the right thing is to reject the Windsor Framework.
Yeah. And at this point, I'm going to take that down, and we'll just remind people of what it was that Jeffrey Donaldson did promise the people of Northern Ireland on the protocol rally stages.
to stand together, united in our determination that the protocol must go and our democratic rights as British citizens should be fully restored.
So the protocol must go and the democratic right of the people of Northern Ireland should be fully restored. And, you know, I side with those words. That's most definite. Right, Ben, what I want to do here is I want to pop up in front of our screen here. Let's give people a bit of context first, and we'll explain what we're going to talk about. Hold on, I have something else to do before we come to the solution. We've something else to do. I believe that what we need to do is that we need to talk about what it is that we see clearly, and you and I had a small chat before that we come on here, what it is that we see is one of the main problems with this deal. Should it be foisted upon us? In where that if we're in the EU single market, we then are takers of directives, EU directives, rule changes. And if we're inside that single market, what that causes is that causes divergence away from the UK internal market. And it also applies is that if the UK then make some new laws because they've got somewhat Brexit, then that also takes Northern Ireland further away from the UK internal market. And I can remember something that Jim Allister said when Jim Allister said in the Ulster Hall in 2019. Jim has talked about things consistently that has became to be the main battlefront. And he said that it's a short step, he says, from the economic union, and this is how the EU done it in the past, to full-blown political union. Ben, would you just like to impress upon people what your thoughts are with reference to divergence from both ends? Should this framework actually be foisted upon us?
Yeah. By the way, the framework's going to be foisted on Northern Ireland. That's going to happen. It's whether it's done with DUP consent or not, and whether Stormont reforms or not. Rishi Sunak is going to do this deal. He's done the deal. It's going to happen. And he's not going to relent. So it's whether the DUP stand up to him or not. Jim Allister, of course, is absolutely right, as he pretty much always is. And being subject to EU laws, as the EU makes new laws and regulations and so on, Northern Ireland will have to comply with them. And it will slowly end up with laws that are quite different from Great Britain. And if it ends up with laws that are quite different from Great Britain, then eventually its trading patterns will have to change because its regulatory framework has changed. And if its trading patterns change, it'll end up trading more with people that have the same laws, in this case, the Republic. And as it trades more with the Republic, the interests of Northern Ireland and businesses and families and farming communities, etc., will be more aligned with the Republic. And through that economic union will then come political union. And when you've got political and economic union, you end up with constitutional union. And that is the danger that Jim saw many years ago, and rightly saw. And that is the same trajectory on which Northern Ireland is still going. And, let's not underestimate this. Even if the DUP hold firm, it's the mother of all battles to get Westminster to develop the political will to protect what ought to be its primary obligation, which is the integrity of the Union of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. You would think that would be its first and foremost obligation as a government, that it would understand that, but it doesn't. This is a government that is for political expedience. It's for a government that plays the 24-hour news cycle. It's for a government that seeks power ahead of knowing what to do with the power once it gets it. It's a government that's morally, the best I can say about it is it's amoral. It certainly hasn't got a moral compass, and I'd say a lot of what it does is immoral. And so, we've got a massive battle on our hands. The battle is completely lost if the DUP concede. There's a sporting chance, albeit a small one, there's a sporting chance that if they don't concede, we can turn the tables over a period of time and bring Northern Ireland back into the United Kingdom. But Jim is right. if we let this thing go, particularly if Stormont is reformed, and effectively that's tacit approval of the agreement by the DUP. Whatever the DUP might then say, if they reform Stormont, that is tacit approval of the Windsor Framework. Fighting back from that position would be virtually impossible. And it might be that the TUV then become a very substantial party in Northern Ireland, because DUP will inevitably lose a massive amount of support if it endorses this deal.
Yeah. And we do see that there's soundings being made at the minute in where that if Stormont were to be put back in place again, and let's say that Jeffrey decided that he was going to go back into Stormont, they're talking about setting Stormont back to as if that they had entered on the first day. So that gives a longer time for people to forget, if you like. So the British government are trying every trick in the book to get this over the line in terms of having the DUP also back in Stormont. Now, the next thing that we want to talk about, Ben, and I'm going through a few subjects here because I think it's essential that we get to do what we normally do. We cut up some small sound bites in order that we can try to win hearts and minds against this. But something that you said to us a few streams ago, and you talked about, but you've always talked about like Singapore on Thames with reference to the Brexit referendum. And, you know, you says that if we want to know what to do, we need to do what the EU are frightened of, and we need to become that Singapore on Thames. And that got me thinking. And then you come back at another time and we talked about then Freeport status for Northern Ireland. Now, as I say, this is what I want to talk about. I'm going to pop up a little document here, or a newspaper article in front of us here. And it's about Freeport zone. I'll use that word zone for Liverpool. And I was talking to Professor John Tong about it last week, and he's kindly passed me on to an expert in that field from within the University of Liverpool to talk about. Because what we want to do is we want to explore the benefits that would come with maybe being a free port. And we believe that if Liverpool are let's say they're worthy of having this free port zone, why can't Northern Ireland have that? Because to me that would flourish Northern Ireland. That would bring in attract investment, which creates jobs, which makes this place prosper. And I believe that maybe something like that should be pushed with and I do like the idea of if anyone wants to trade with the EU, I believe in the Centre for the Unions solution, whereby that the goods could be put into an imaginary tunnel and they could be fed into the EU from right around the United Kingdom, causing the circumstances whereby that the Act of the Union could be reinstated, fully restored. So I just want to pop up this document, Ben, and then we'll get your thoughts on this free port status with that tunnel idea for feeding the goods into the EU. And I believe that Jeffrey should hold strong. And this is a viable solution. This isn't fantasy. This is already happening in the United Kingdom. So there is precedent for this type of thing. And, I believe that all our efforts should be maybe used trying to persuade for this solution, which would be suitable for everyone. Let me just pop this up now. Okay, so I just have to check. Yes, we've got it there in front of our screen. So I'm going to read from this. So Freeport for Liverpool City region will create 14,000 jobs. The Liverpool City region and local business leaders have welcomed the announcement today of the Liverpool City region has been awarded free port status. A free trade zone for the city region will contribute around 850 million and create 14,000 jobs, as well as lead on solutions to meet the region's net zero targets. So you go on down here and it talks about it's a groundbreaking announcement. And here's what it's listing that the components, the core components are of this. It says the core opportunities at a free port zone are increased trade through the Port of Liverpool and other city region gateways, improving efficiency and flows, driving employment and growth. Develop a globally significant cluster of port manufacturing, logistics, and innovative activity. Be a central tool in attracting inward investment. Regenerate areas of deprivation and create sustainable job creation. Make a significant contribution in rebalancing UK freight and logistics. Improve links to national, regional, and city regional infrastructure assets. Support the enablement of national and local ambitions for net zero. And what's your thoughts on that Freeport zone status?
Well, I mean, the proof of the pudding is always in the eating, isn't it? So we'll wait and see, to what extent Liverpool benefits from it. But as a matter of principle, it has to be the right way to go. And, I would make virtually all of Northern Ireland, certainly Belfast, a free port. And I think more importantly, I think Northern Ireland has to take advantage of the devolved authority that it has to set its own corporation tax rate. I'm sure you're familiar with this, John, already, but in 2015, a law was passed which allowed Northern Ireland to set its own corporation tax rate if it wished to do that. And it's never been implemented. It's never been exercised by the executive in Northern Ireland because they fear losing part of the block grant if they cut corporation tax. As soon as they implement that law, they lose that portion of the block grant. And then if they cut corporation tax, of course, the net income for Northern Ireland reduces. But there is a way, which is a bit complex and I can't go into it. I will go into it in detail at some point, John, if you want me to, but I don't think it's appropriate for this program. But there is a way for Northern Ireland actually to cut corporation tax and act as a low tax jurisdiction for the United Kingdom, attracting businesses from the world into Northern Ireland, from the Republic into Northern Ireland, and from Great Britain into Northern Ireland. And if it can do that, actually, it will neuter to quite a significant extent the economic diversion of trade that's taking place. It's actually one thing I said when I wrote an article, which nationalists and Remainers never hesitate to throw back in my face. I wrote an article in February 2020 when I thought that the protocol was set in stone and there's nothing that could be done about it because we'd Brexited and the withdrawal agreement was signed and so on. And I wrote an article in which I said if the right tax conditions can be created, corporation tax can be cut, funding can be made available to Northern Ireland, then the adverse consequences of the protocol can be neutered. And of course, there are always ways to take mitigating steps. So creating a free port, cutting corporation taxes in Northern Ireland, investing in Northern Ireland, making it easier for banks to lend in Northern Ireland by reducing their capital adequacy ratios. All these kind of things can and should be done in order to boost Northern Ireland's economic position. And one of the things that I think has been so remiss of Westminster is a failure properly to manage the economy of Northern Ireland, given that it trades on an open basis with the Republic. And the Republic is on such a different corporation tax rate. And remember also, the Republic has had massive British government investment. People listening to this program are going to go, well, why does Ben say that the British government's been investing in the Republic? But we have been. And the reason the British government's been investing in the Republic is because it's been paying huge sums of money to the EU over many, many years, significant parts of which went into the Republic. So the Republic has had new airports, new roads, new railways, new building, whereas Northern Ireland has been overlooked. And that balance needs to be redressed. So yes, free port's a great idea, but cut corporation tax rates, invest in Northern Ireland, cut capital adequacy ratios required for lending, make sure there's an adequate source of funding available, deregulate planning, John, deregulate planning, particularly in Belfast and other areas, connect up Londonderry with a half-decent train service to Belfast, Fermanagh to Belfast. There's no easy way to get around Northern Ireland. These are basic things that His Majesty's government should just be doing, together with Stormont. They should just be doing this should have done it already in order to make Northern Ireland a good, forceful tiger economy, is how I described it in my article in February 2020. And there's no reason why Northern Ireland shouldn't have that fantastic status. And the great shame is that it hasn't been done. And, that needs to be done. It needs to be done. So Freeport is one aspect of it, but there's a lot that can be done, John, actually to make Northern Ireland a powerhouse of an economy. And people who say, oh, it's too small an economy, you can't do it. Actually, it's the small economies where you can turn things around like that. And I can tell you, if they made corporation tax close to zero for new businesses coming into Northern Ireland, you would see Northern Ireland's economic prospects change overnight. It would change overnight. I would come and relocate my business from London to Belfast instantly if I had a 0% corporation tax rate. People aren't stupid. They will follow the money. Cut corporation tax rate, become a free port, make capital freely available, deregulate planning so you can develop when you want to develop. These are all things that could boost Northern Ireland dramatically overnight. And I don't know why they're not done.
Yeah, I mean, that probably would have been the solution to start looking at, rather than all of this nonsense with protocols and Windsor frameworks and so on and so forth. Ben, I'm going to pop up a picture on our screen here. I'm going to ask you a question off the back of this picture. But this is something that was done at Stormont last year, last Easter, on the anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement. Now, this picture you're about to see has a significance, and we'll pop it up and we'll ask you one question. Is Northern Ireland's sale agreed, or has it actually been sold?
Well, the word sale is not what I would use. When you sell something, you get something in return, don't you?
Yeah.
And Northern Ireland has been thrown under a bus, is what is how I would describe it. Sold down the drain, yeah.
Sold down the drain. So sold is the answer to that one. So Ben, thanks very much for coming along yet again. We've been through the subjects that I wanted to cover. And what I will do is that I'll go back again, as usual, and we'll cut a lot of this up. And we'll get some of the very, very important points out. So back to the framework before that we finish here again. So in essence, could you summarise on what the framework is doing to Northern Ireland?
So the framework, the Windsor Framework, reasserts the protocol. It sets in stone the laws that have already exist in Northern Ireland. It gives some derogations in terms of trade between Great Britain and Northern Ireland, but those could be unilaterally withdrawn by the EU if it chooses to withdraw them. And then finally, it puts a fig leaf of a democratic integrity, if you like. The democratic deficit is addressed with this fig leaf of a Stormont break, which actually is ineffectual. It doesn't work. It'll never be exercised, the Stormont break. So that's the Windsor Framework in a nutshell.
Yeah, and we looked at the DUP7 tests, and this was by special request by a man that works in our background. But I was asked to play this little video clip, and then we'll ask, would this have been sufficient as a red line? And it's Arlene Foster speaking these words when she said that this is the DUP's one red line, which then became 7. So listen to Arlene.
Willing to accept any checks across the North Sea, even if they are of a regulatory nature, not customs checks?
No, and it's been very clear all along that has been our one red line, that we cannot have either a customs border down the Irish Sea or a regulatory border, because that would make us separate from the rest of the United Kingdom, and that doesn't work from a constitutional perspective, and it doesn't work from an economic perspective either.
What if there was some political declaration that, okay, we have to agree to the possibility of checks, but they'll never be used? There's no way that they can add some language that would make you happy with any kind of extra checks?
No, because of course that would impede the constitutional integrity of the United Kingdom.
So one red line, we can't have customs or regulatory border on the Irish Sea. That red line became 7 red lines. None of those red lines have been satisfied, in my opinion. Should they have kept it simple, Ben, with that one red line?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting looking at the DUP 7 test because there's only one test. Is Article 6 of the Act of Union in existence, or has it been disapplied, subjugated, impliedly repealed, whatever word? Does Article 6 exist for Northern Ireland? That's the only test that matters for me. If you can satisfy yourself that Article 6 has been restored as far as Northern Ireland is concerned, then all the other issues evaporate.
Yeah.
They just go.
Yeah.
The other 6 tests are basically functions of the Act of Union.
And whenever that we were listening to the Conservative government, Chris Heaton Harris and his merry band of men, and whenever they were talking about, you heard the stories that the DUP 7 tests are being met under the Windsor Framework. I mean, I just don't know how these people can claim such things. And I'm appealing to the DUP hierarchy right now, to come out and to state clearly that those tests are not met. And therefore, I would say be upfront about things. Now, perhaps that they're playing a political game, perhaps that they're trying to make themselves electable come the next council elections. I mean, I'm just at a loss as to trying to understand why the DUP are really silent on all of this, because what I do see, and I took some soundings at the weekend when I was out and about in different parts, and people are saying that, the DUP are doing the wrong thing, that they need to come out and tell the people, where they stand in all of this. And people are actually judging things, thinking that the DUP are literally going to, excuse this expression, but shaft them, basically. So that's why I believe that they should be out now, and they should be trying to save, I'm going to say save what could possibly be a huge disconnect in our political system here in Northern Ireland. We can't make, all we can do is use the words, Ben, cut the clips and try to get those clips across to people. So, Ben, once again, thank you very much for coming along. And I would just like you to use this last time here to talk to the live chat, basically, and to, I mean, if you anything that you think that we should be doing, is there any hopes or fears or concerns that you see storing up for the future that we haven't discussed in this stream?
No, I don't think there's anything significant that we haven't discussed. I think there are economic mitigants that can be put in place to protect Northern Ireland, which no one's talking about, which I would like to see more discussion of, because you can always neuter bad political decisions economically, and the British government seems to be devoid of ideas on that front. But if people are listening and they've got questions, I'd love people to put their questions up. I think they can text, can't they? So I can see questions as they come up. So if anyone's got questions, that would be a great thing to do.
There's one
I'm very
here.
grateful, by the way, for everyone,
Thanks
tuning in on a Monday night. Yeah.
There's what you'll find. I mean, there's one here that I've seen, Ben. This is by Mike Braithwaite. In fact, Mike would have attended at the Supreme Court with us. Mike comes from England.
Yeah, he texts me on Messenger.
Yeah. So all these checks for some 0.2% of EU trade, more checks between GB and NI, and there are goods coming to the Superport of Rotterdam. That deals in hundreds of thousands more goods into the single market than what passed through Northern Ireland. Well, why, other than malice from the EU? Is it malice, do you think?
It is a recognition. The EU is an organism. And when the United Kingdom voted to leave the EU, we threatened that organism. And the organism reacted to ensure that any other threats to it wouldn't be manifested as a result of member states seeing what the UK was doing. So the EU very early on decided and recognized that it needs to punish the UK for trying to leave the EU for fear of other member states following our lead. And they didn't initially focus on Northern Ireland. It wasn't until Leo Varadkar weaponized the whole thing, that they suddenly, the penny dropped with them and they thought, right, we can really use this. And I describe it as a grappling hook or a gaff into the flesh of the United Kingdom, either to hold the UK very closely to the EU and or rip Northern Ireland out. And by the way, I think they can do both. I think at the moment what's happening is they're ripping Northern Ireland out and they're making Rishi Sunak take the knee to the EU. And it's not vindictive in the sense that this is a jilted lover that wants to get revenge. This is an economic political organism that wishes to protect itself, and it's reacting to our decision to leave, and it'll use any means to protect its own interests. And they have, the EU, unlike our own government, has political will. It has it's paramount for the EU, to the EU, that it succeeds. Our government doesn't seem to have a desire to succeed. Our government is consumed by political weakness. And it's been a real eye-opener for me in the 4 or 5 years that I've been involved in politics, 4 years now, that our government is so pathetic when it comes to protecting essential British interests. You know, I completely accept that our government is into managed decline. It's not even managed decline. They just accept we're in decline. And they've got no vision for how to grow the United Kingdom. And Rishi Sunak is one of the worst. Jeremy Hunt is one of the worst. This government is awful, and they need to be ejected ASAP.
Yeah. And just one more thing, Ben. We talked about this a few years ago, and we anticipate that Scotland will be demanding much of the same treatment with reference to what's happening to Northern Ireland under this Windsor Framework, and also in Wales they would be demanding. Have you any predictions for that future?
Yeah, well, I mean, isn't it interesting that Rishi Sunak in Belfast was saying, you're so lucky, you're part of the EU single market. Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, any SNP member worth his salt will pick up on that, go, well, if that's so bloody wonderful, why can't we all be part of the single market? And this is what I mean about Brexit being defeated. This is where we're going. Rishi Sunak is not a Brexiteer. He's not a conservative. He doesn't believe in people determining their own futures. He's not a Brexiteer like he claims to be, because he believes in the single market. He believes in very close cooperation with supranational institutions across the globe. And he's not a unionist. We know that too. This man is not fit for office. And yet we have him there. I've digressed, but Scotland will take its lead from Northern Ireland. Absolutely. And I don't think the government understands it. It needs to rescue Northern Ireland. It needs to be strong on Northern Ireland if it's to hold the country together. And that is its primary obligation. The defense of the realm. This is an economic and political attack on the realm. It may not have tanks and guns being fired off by the EU, but this is precisely where a normal war ends up. If you wage war on a country, you wage war on it in order to have your laws foisted on it, to make it bow to your will. And we have bowed to the EU's will, as I often say, without a single shot being fired. And if Rishi Sunak doesn't get ahead of the problem, you will see that problem manifest itself in Scotland. Absolutely. He's storing up trouble for himself. And he doesn't seem to see that.
Yeah. Ben, thanks very much for your time yet again. And what I'm going to be doing here is I'm going to be playing you out with a little song in a moment. Thanks very much to the live chat. And if you would also still like to share this out and about, we started fairly early. And what you'll find with these streams is that people come along in the future to actually watch them. So once again, Ben, thanks very much. And we got some very, very interesting thoughts there from yourself. Until next time, Ben. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
I looked outside. What did I see? A little bird. He looked at me. I lured him close. With a piece of bread. And then I smashed. His little head. The moral of the story is. You want some head. You need some bread.
a broken land. This culture's learned to at times like this, to pray seems so absurd. This modern culture's and a vision of this truly dying world. When did the boy become a man and lose his life to love? No more confusion to their plans. But times are now changing. Show us the love to keep us together. Open up your hearts, don't turn us away. Stand with us through this stormy weather. From where I stand, I see a broken land. Show us the love to keep us together. Open up your hearts, don't turn us away. Stand with us through this stormy weather. From where I stand, I see a broken land. Show us the love to keep us together.
I looked outside. What did I see? What did I see? A little bird. A little bird. He looked at me. He looked at me. I lured him close. I lured him close. With a piece of bread. With a piece of bread. And then I smashed. And then I smashed his little head.